Welcome back to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Podcast. I'm Graham Richmond, and this is your Wiretaps podcast for Monday, May 4th, 2020. Alex Brown, welcome back. How are things doing?
Very good, Graham. Still surviving, obviously, during this sort of very uncertain time with COVID-19, but, all things considered, yes, very, very well.
Good. Glad to hear it. So I just noticed as we were getting ready to record this episode that this is our 99th episode of the Clear Admit podcast overall, not just Wiretaps, but, all the episodes we've ever done. So coming up on a big milestone, I have to think about what we'll do for that. Couple of quick updates. I know that you've picked out a decision wire and two apply wire entries to focus our Wiretaps segment on. But before we get to that, I just wanted to mention that as our listeners know, we did this really interesting survey on COVID-19 concerns that admitted students have, and probably a lot of prospects too. We published the findings on our website last week. So by all means, check that out. It's just interesting to see what the concerns are in different areas of the applicant pool with, particularly like international students versus domestic have, kind of different concerns and what are the common areas too that are troubling to folks. So we've got that out there. Check it out. There are just so many conversations happening on the website on clearadmit.com right now, specifically on Livewire and DecisionWire, where people are debating, where to go or round 3 or round 4 rolling kind of admissions policies. And so the site is really abuzz with activity. And I'll let you speak to that in a second, Alex. The only last thing I wanted to mention was that the Forte Foundation, which supports, kind of women in business, they released their annual report. We published a short article on that as well. Just always interesting to see all the things they've been doing and achieving in the space in terms of helping business schools get closer and closer to parity with male-female representation, which is great. And then the last thing, I'll maybe just leave this to you, but HBS came out with some news since we last recorded for admitted students. And so do you want to comment on that? And give our listeners a sense of what they're doing?
Sure. I don't remember the actual specifics of the announcement, so you might need to make sure I don't misspeak, but HBS is offering all admitted candidates the opportunity to defer their admission in a limited time window, which I think is smart on the part of HBS. Given all the uncertainty out there, I was going to add to your earlier comments in terms of discussion, not only where to go that these candidates are having, but if to go, if they can go. There's just so much uncertainty out there in the marketplace. Anyway, so HBS's reaction to that, I think, is quite sensitive as well as quite smart. So they're giving a limited window. Say if you want to defer, you can defer, and then they shut that window, I guess, after a couple of weeks or whatever, and then HBS will still have a wait list of candidates which they could, I guess, in theory, go to make sure that they can bring a class in this coming fall that they want to bring in. So I think a smart move on the part of HBS. I expect to see other schools follow a similar sort of strategy, Graham. Mm-hmm. But we shall see. Other schools are going to have to make these decisions pretty quickly, I think.
I agree. The interesting thing about HBS is that, like you said, so they're saying, hey, deferrals for everyone if you want it, but they're saying you've got to apply, I think, between May 15th and June the 1st in order to get a deferral. And then they also are saying that they're going to defer people into either the following year's class or 2 years from now. And I think that's the key thing. So HBS, on the one hand, comes off as being, proactive and open to the idea that people don't want to come to school this fall, which is great. On the other hand, they're kind of keeping it in a tight window. You have only a couple weeks to let them know. And they're saying, look, if you opt to defer, we can't promise that it'll be 1 year. It might have to be 2. And so I think what they're going to end up doing is they're going to get a lot of candidates to reveal their preferences in short order, which will really help them to kind of solidify the class, figure out their wait list, and just get this done with so they can move on to planning for the fall and getting into the next admission cycle. So I think it's a good move. I think that what I also like about it is that if you opt to attend, then you're probably not going to complain when the fall rolls around, if it's partially online, or if there are aspects of the program that are a bit different because of COVID-19. You opted into it, so they're basically saying, look, do you want to come? If you don't want to come, we'll defer you. If you do, let us know. And I think that's going to eliminate some of these arguments around, well, I want a tuition discount because this isn't exactly what I signed up for.
Right.
So I think it's a good move all around, very smart on their part. And I agree with you. We'll probably see some schools follow suit, although I don't think every school is in the exact same position of being able to defer so many candidates or be this flexible. I mean, so I guess we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting. I mean, you think of this idea that, everybody wants to defer or whatever it might be, given all the uncertainty. But the reality of that is, what are they going to do for the next year or 2 years as they take that deferral? Because clearly their plan was to go to business school this year, so they might have already quit their job, or they might have already turned in their notice, and given the the environment, that process might have accelerated. So deferral isn't necessarily the easiest path forward during these times. Sometimes it's quite likely that the best path forward is to attend the MBA program that you wanted to attend, recognize that the first few months of the experience might not be exactly what you originally signed up for, but it still may be preferable than delaying your plans for a year. And I know I say all this as international candidates have a whole nother set of circumstances to overcome, so I got to be sensitive to that. But I certainly think the option of defaulting to take a deferral, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the easy and the right move in all cases.
Yeah, agree. And I think at some point maybe we'll have a longer discussion about, what do you do if a deferral that you request at another school, maybe not HBS, is denied? Do you go or not? Because I think there's a whole other issue there, and I have a lot of thoughts on that. In the meantime, though, I guess, I wanted to move into the, to the wiretaps candidates that you picked out, but I did want to give people a kind of check-in. You're at 348 likes on the site from your comments. I'm actually gaining a little bit. I'm at 177. And again, the coolest thing is just all these starred users on the site now gaining likes of their own and building their kind of, whatever you want to call it, kind of community points. So that's really cool to see.
Yes.
We still need more reviews and ratings. I feel like I say this every week, but we would love it if you just take 2 seconds, pull the phone out of your pocket, take a look, hit the 5-star button or the 1-star if you don't like what we have to say, but give us a rating, write a review. It really helps. And I know this is a critical time of the year where the next crop of applicants are coming in. And I'd love for, the next crop of applicants to know about this podcast, since so many of you who listened throughout this admission season have written to us and said that it was really useful. Anything else, Alex, before we kind of get into our wiretaps entries?
No, I say let's kick on.
All right. So wiretaps candidate number 1. This is an apply wire entry, and the person is thinking of applying to Berkeley, Columbia, Duke, Michigan, Kellogg, Stanford, and Wharton. They want to start in the fall of 2021. They've been working in what they describe as environment and sustainability. Post-MBA, they're thinking consulting, tech, or maybe consumer goods. And the companies that they listed were Bain, BCG, Deloitte, and McKinsey. The GPA 3.5 from undergrad, and they have 4.5 years of work experience. This person is in Australia and is an Australian national. And they would like to hang out in the US after business school if possible, and then get back to Australia in the longer term. They did also indicate a few kind of tidbits and notes. They did an undergrad in electrical and electronics engineering. They also did a graduate degree, like a master's in engineering, which was focused on energy planning and policy, and I guess also engineering management. So one of the things I thought was kind of cool is extracurricularly, they're like a multiple world time champion in karate. They actually were a professional cricketer for 2 years, and did high school basketball. So big time sports person, level 4 FIFA football. I mean, it just goes on and on. And yeah, they're kind of working in I guess they're working in this kind of environment and sustainability role for Australia and New Zealand's largest transport and tourism company. And they'd also, I guess, had done some work at a Big Four consultancy prior. So lots here. I know we had some back and forth with this candidate. And so I wondered, what's your kind of summary based on the information they furnished us after we asked some questions and things?
Yeah, quite frankly, Graham, if this candidate gets a decent test score, which I imagine they're reasonably intelligent, right? They got master's degrees in electronic and electrical engineering and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't see where the weakness is here, quite frankly. I reckon that their work experience is interesting and well developed, impact and so on and so forth. What's also interesting about it is sort of hits the markers in terms of sustainability, environmental stuff, which is more and more important. If you're a world champion at something, I don't care what it is. That's fantastic. That shows just you're the best in the world. It could be horn blowing, it could be karate. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, that's brilliant. So not only is this person potentially on the one side a massive geek, but on the other side, they're a great athlete, professional cricketer, which is obviously much better than being a professional baseball player, let's face it, Graham. Cricket is known around the world. You can have a true world championship in cricket, I would suggest.
Okay.
Anyway, the point being, yeah, my notes when I was looking through this and the comments back and forth, and, you know, we had our colleague from Stacey Blackman also commenting and so on and so forth. Where's the flaw, Graham? I mean, maybe you could argue that the goals need tightening a little bit and so on and so forth, and you hope the goals have some of that sustainable spin to them and they're remaining in that sort of field a little bit. But I imagine this person will come back with a test score in the mid-700s, somewhere around there. They better be applying to the best schools. They better execute well on their applications and, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they're from Australia, Graham. I mean, it's like they hit all the markers. I mean, not that everybody should be from Australia, but I mean, again, it's an underrepresented country at these top business schools in the United States. Everything else just really hits a good marker, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think obviously they need to get an okay GMAT score just to sort of, you know, because the GPA 3.5 is solid, but it's and it's in a challenging major, so I think it's fine.
Yeah.
But it is below average if you look at like Stanford's average GPA or something. So hitting the mark on the GMAT would be smart, but I'm not worried. Like, I agree. What I do like about this person is, I mean, way back when I actually applied to business school, I still remember the brochure, I think it was from Wharton, where they talked about wanting to attract Renaissance leaders. That was the word they used, which, you know, for them just meant like well-rounded. And when I think of, you know, the fact that this guy, I think it's a guy, studied, you know, engineering, so all the kind of quant type stuff, but then also has all these, you know, kind of other activities in the world of sport. Like, there's a nice balance there. And I totally agree. The sustainability piece is really interesting. And it helps that, you know, they did the kind of consultant at a Big Four climate change services team. And then, you know, it sounds like they moved on to their current role. So there's a really interesting thread around sustainability that they can, I presume, weave into their application and kind of goals. And yeah, I mean, the Australia thing, it's not... Yeah, there just aren't that many Australians that apply to the top schools, and you know, it's always nice to have a balance of people in the class. So they tend to do well as long as they hit the mark on the stats. And so yeah, this person, you know, they got to do a good job on their application to get into some of these very top schools. But I think sky's the limit. They should be able to pull it off. I mean, yeah, I was really impressed, and I think, yeah, there's some hard work ahead for them in terms of getting everything together. But this is a solid candidacy.
Yeah, so I would say solid to very good. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess the ingredients are there for a candidate to be applying at the very top schools, allowing for the fact that they obviously still need to take the standardized test. But everything else, super situation, I think.
Yeah, agreed. So I want to thank that person for sending in their post and for all the great dialogue. I love it when, a couple of people chime in on the candidate, and then you get, the candidate coming back and shedding some additional light. So that was just a great entry. Let's move on and talk about Wiretap's candidate number 2. So this person is applying also for fall 2021, looking at Berkeley, HBS, MIT Sloan, Kellogg, Stanford, Booth, and Wharton. So I think this is basically the M7 without Columbia, but with Haas swapped in. So interesting list of schools, all really great. This person has been working in marketing analytics. They want to be in tech after business school, and the companies that they are looking at are Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, Microsoft. That's the same company, actually. Oracle, Twitter. So, the usual suspects, I guess you could say. GMAT score is 730. This candidate does plan to potentially retake because they're convinced they can hit 750 plus. And the GPA is 3.74. Currently, it sounds like 2.5 years of work experience, living in Singapore, but this candidate is Taiwanese. They actually worked in Taiwan for a time, and then because of, were basically promoted and moved over to a new role in Singapore. So I guess they've been promoted twice, actually. One other really important detail is that they mentioned that that they like the podcast. They said the podcast is fantastic, and they said they enjoy listening to it while jogging. So now I think, Alex, we can literally say that this podcast is good for your health.
Yes,
which is a nice feather in our in our cap. But in any event, there was a big debate that you and I had with this candidate. So do you want to shed some light on that and weigh in on what you think of this person's chances at these top schools?
Yeah, I mean, you said I'm going to disagree slightly with Alex. I don't really understand how you can ever disagree with me, Graham, whether it's slightly or directly, but there we go. But yeah, I mean, actually, maybe I didn't articulate my point of view correctly, because I think we're kind of on the same page here. This candidate has a lot of upside. Obviously, their numbers are fantastic: 730 GMAT, 374 GPA. And so on and so forth. They're 2.5 years into their career, doing sort of quite analytical type work, I think, is from what I understand. And their sort of big question is, should I apply this upcoming season, or should I wait another season before I apply? So my sort of response was twofold. And I'll defend it, and then I'll let you, retort. But I don't think there's anything wrong with this person applying next season. Will this person is it the ideal time for this person to apply in terms of overall strength of candidacy? I don't know. Depending on the trajectory and what they've been able to do at work, where they can show impact, the growth, and various other things at the very top schools that this person's applying to will be looking for. But I don't see there's any harm in applying next season, at least to a few of these schools, and they may well be successful, which is great. And if they're not successful, what you learn through the application process can set you up very well for the following season. And as we know, Graham, schools tend to look favourably upon, or at least the data would suggest, reapplicants do better in the admissions process at many schools than first-time applicants. So I don't think there's any harm in applying next season. I just wonder whether they will be at their peak in terms of an MBA candidate next season or the following season. That's sort of the debatable issue.
Yeah, and I think the place that I was kind of disagreeing was I was saying that they should absolutely go for it, and that I think they could be a strong candidate this year. I guess my thought was, look, by the time they start school, they'll have like 3.5 to 4 years of experience. Yeah. And that may be enough. And I guess part of me felt like if they do hit that high GMAT score, if they're going to retake it and get, 750 or something, suddenly the academic profile is literally impeccable. It's already pretty fantastic, but it becomes, kind of ironclad. And I liked, even though they're doing kind of analytical work, I liked that they'd already been promoted twice. They're working in tech, doing marketing analytics, and they've been, had this international experience of moving from Taiwan to Singapore. So I felt like there was a lot going for them? I mean, obviously we need to know a bit more about, outside interests and what else.
I mean, I was going to bring that right up. I mean, is this guy a world champion at anything or whatever?
Right, we don't know.
Yeah, I'm kidding. But obviously, our previous candidate, having that also as part of their profile, I think is absolutely amazing, right?
True.
Whereas this candidate, we don't know who they are as a person and what they do outside of work or, when they're at university outside of the classroom. So maybe there's something really interesting there also that can help bolster their profile.
Right.
But, that's what the very top schools will be looking at.
Well, we know they can put jogging while listening to podcasts on their resume, right?
Yeah.
And that's
yeah, but I'm not sure if that's a positive or a negative, but there you go.
No, but I suspect that this person has some outside activities. Maybe they can share in the comments and we'll weigh in further on the website. But I just kind of felt like, why not? Part of my motivation in this was that I feel like the next year could be sort of strange in the workplace, right? And I think that, people who are lower on the totem pole are at risk, right? I mean, there's some, we don't really know how the virus is going to track. And so my thought was maybe applying now, or sorry, over the summer into the fall would be smart because it just, we don't really know what's going to happen with their career. Sometimes people's careers get derailed for reasons beyond their control. So I was sort of saying, hey, you know what? Get it in your apps, do a really great job, retake that GMAT, and then, maybe they can sit back a bit and ride out some of the recession in business school. So in any event, that was my thought. But yeah, interesting case.
Let me toss something back to you on that. One of the points you just made there, Graham. Retaking the GMAT. Obviously, they put this forward. They may retake the GMAT. They got a 730, but they may try to get a 750. Assuming that takes time and effort to do that, Graham, and they were juggling, should I do that or should I ratchet up my involvement in a particular activity that I'm already currently engaged in to sort of bolster that part of my application? So if it's an either or, which would you advise the candidate to do?
I'd probably go with bolstering the outside, activities, because 730 is fine. I mean, I'd love to know the breakdown of their test. I'd love to know their undergraduate major and the caliber of the undergraduate institution. I will say that, while Taiwan could be lumped in with, a lot of countries in that region of the world, and it's kind of an overrepresented portion of the applicant pool, I think that Taiwan is looked slightly more favorably upon by the U.S. admissions officers because it's a market that they feel, that they're confident in the caliber of the education. There's some really good universities, and also I feel as though the level of English language is better in that country than some other countries in the region. And I also think that, just I hate to say it, but I feel like there's a little bit of, points for Taiwan being kind of a democracy and a, big ally. And so I think that Taiwan is often looked favorably upon.
Right.
Because they mentioned they were worried about that. And I was sort of like, well, there are a lot of people applying from there. But I think a lot of them get in. I mean, it's a big source of applicants for schools.
Yeah.
So, in any event, that's a kind of sidebar, but I agree. If they hadn't proposed retaking the GMAT, I don't think I would have rushed out and said, "Oh, you gotta, reset that 730."
Yeah.
It's just that if they're sensing a 750 is easily within reach, then I'm kind of like, wow, maybe it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't hurt, and for sure 750 is better than 730. I'm not going to argue that point.
Yeah.
I just think that if it's a point of trying to show that you're more well-rounded, that you have impact outside of work as well as in work, then ratcheting up that side of it might actually provide you more value in the short run.
Agreed. Yeah. So. Thanks for that post. I'm so thrilled that someone's enjoying the podcast while running.
Yes.
All right, let's move on and talk about Wiretap's candidate number 3. This is a decision wire entry, and the candidate is undecided between, very simple, Berkeley and Darden. They have offers from both to start this fall. They want to work in consulting, ideally, with Bain, BCG, Deloitte, McKinsey. And then they also have this kind of side, kind of goal, of maybe tech. So they mentioned Microsoft as a potential landing place as well. GMAT score was 760 and the GPA 3.6. This is a candidate who applied and is currently living in India. And they note that they are undecided between Haas and Darden. Darden comes with a half tuition scholarship, Haas with no dollars, it looks like. They said their criteria for school selection is in this order of priority. 1, recruitment in strategy consulting and tech. 2, school brand and reputation. 3, culture, ideally a collaborative and close-knit community. And then 4, alumni connections. So what do you make of this? We had a number of people chiming in on this post, but what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, the candidates obviously super smart. They've been successful in the admission process. That's great numbers. And their number one priority is recruitment opportunities in strategy, consulting, and tech. I completely understand that. What is not clear is where does the candidate want to be from a geographic standpoint, either during the MBA, but certainly post-MBA. Obviously, during the MBA would be crystal clear. So that hasn't been conveyed. And if you're getting an admissions at Haas and you're getting a partial scholarship at Darden, some would argue that puts those two schools at parity. Many of the rankings might place Haas just 1 or 2 points ahead of Darden. It's quite close, and a bit of scholarship money at Darden would certainly level the playing field. So in terms of overall quality and brand and so forth, I think there's negligible difference. In terms of strategy consulting, we know that Darden is a great opportunity and it focuses on the case study method and does very well in that regard. But presumably Haas also does well in strategy consulting. And then you look at, on the other side, in tech, Haas located in Silicon, on the West Coast, obviously very close to the very strong tech sector. So on the tech side, you would think Haas would be the choice. So really, and you can read a lot of the feedback from a variety of different people on the site, and I don't think it's clear cut, Graham. I think if you try to look at the consensus, they might say, well, just marginally Haas. But I would throw it back to you, Graham, and say, if you knew this candidate wanted to work in New York City post-MBA, either in strategy consulting or in tech, which of the two schools would you encourage them to attend?
Boy, yeah, it's a tough call. I mean, I really think this is a really interesting decision wire entry because it's so close in my mind, because these schools are not light years apart in terms of their ranking or prestige, and you have this large scholarship. Because, I mean, the thing I was thinking about is not whether they want to be in New York almost, but I wondered, like, what if I were to tell you that this candidate is likely to have to go back to India, for one reason or another, like they don't get a visa, or the US changes its policy, or because then suddenly earning power is a lot lower and that half tuition is looking really great from Darden. The other thing I want to point out is that Berkeley, the cost of living in the Bay Area versus Charlottesville, Virginia is quite different. And so I think there's a pretty big dollar kind of swing here in terms of the choice they make. And so I mean, my view is that Darden places really well with MBB and consulting. I mean, their curriculum is kind of tailor-made for working as a consultant. It's case-driven, et cetera. I mean, they're the only school other than HBS that's like sort of exclusively case. So it's tailor-made for that. If this person said, I want to work for McKinsey in DC or New York, then this is like a no-brainer to me, especially given the money and that this person may have to go back to India at some point. But as you said, if they want to work at Microsoft or Amazon or any of the companies down in the Bay Area, for example, then it's a little more challenging. And I think some of this is related to their risk appetite. If they want to kind of roll the dice and say, yeah, I'll spend more money, I'll go out to the West Coast and hopefully I'll land a job where I can stay in the States and earn the big bucks in the Valley, or in Washington State or something, and then eventually maybe make the move back to India or something. Then it just depends on their risk appetite. It's hard to say, because I think that there's a pretty good chance that maybe they get STEM. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think Berkeley's programs are STEM. Darden might be as well.
Right.
So maybe they're allowed to stay for up to 3 years, and maybe that renders this all moot. But even so, like, there's a difference between staying for 3 years and being able to stay like permanently in the U.S. And I don't know that. I mean, it depends on who gets elected in the fall as to how that all plays out, right? So this is not. I don't think this is so easy. I agree with you that the comments seem to say, oh, Berkeley's higher ranked. Don't worry about the money. Berkeley's better for tech anyway, and so just go to the Bay Area. It's more fun. But I'm also, the one thing that jumped out at me is they talked about wanting a collaborative and close-knit community. And I mean, that's, when you think of that, you instantly think of Darden, Tuck. I mean, these small schools in kind of more rural locations where people don't have any choice but to hang out together. So I don't know. It's a tough call. I wonder, do you have a sense, and maybe you don't, but do you have a sense as to like, what's the alumni footprint for these schools in a market like India or anywhere abroad? Like it's tough.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a question that the students are going to have to do some pretty good research themselves. And look at how active the alumni network is in your home regions and stuff like that. Not just do they have an alumni network, but in the past, pre-COVID-19, how often did they meet? What did they do? And that sort of stuff. And I just throw one more question back at you, Graham, and I know we're running out. Well, we have run out of time, but we'll have you answer this question real quick. Let's assume we go into a global depression, right? With COVID-19, and I don't think that's not a far-fetched notion, right? In terms of recruiting, we know over the last several years that the tech sector has become a really big recruiting end for the MBA program. It's been very vibrant. It's overtaken finance and so on and so forth. But if we go into a pretty significant depression and so forth, how do you see that affecting both strategy consulting recruiting and tech sector recruiting?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm not an expert, but I would argue that when you have a major recession, the dollars companies spend on consultants are the first dollars to go out the door. I mean, that's you get rid of the consultants, then you get rid of the lower level staff. I mean that's
right.
And so I think the consulting field typically does poorly when there's a big recession. Tech, it's, obviously when we had the .com bubble burst, tech was awful, right? But right now, one of the things I've been watching is look at, the ticker for Netflix, Apple, Amazon. These are stocks that have not gone down much at all, if at all, during the current stock market crisis around COVID-19. Now, maybe they will, but truth is that Amazon is sort of busier than ever, right? And Netflix as well. So I think it depends, but if you ask me to put my money on it, I would say, the tech sector will be less impacted by a recession related to the virus, because a lot of these companies will still be able to function, and if anything, maybe have greater importance than they would have had in the past. So, yeah, if you think now the other side of this though is that if there is a recession and countries are closing borders and being very nationalist about it, then this candidate's more likely to end up back in India after business school.
Yeah.
And so then, but they could work for Microsoft in Hyderabad or something. I mean, a lot of these companies have big offices all around the major markets in India too. So, yeah, tech could become more important if the economy really goes into a funk.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting things to have to start thinking about that we wouldn't have had to have thought about 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how is the landscape going to shift? And I believe, personally, it's going to shift quite significantly.
Yeah, we will see. Let's hope that it's, people talk about a V, type recovery. Let's hope it's that, where we have this massive concern and then we find a cure or a vaccine or a treatment or whatever, and then things start to really quickly ramp back up. But I agree, it's going to be a long time before we're at like 2019 levels of like air travel.
Yeah.
So we shall see. Thanks again, as always, for picking out these candidates to discuss, and obviously personal thanks to those candidates who shared their Apply Wire and Decision Wire posts on the site. We love this stuff and love breaking them down. Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be back in 1 week's time with another episode of Wiretaps. And as always, please stay healthy. We hope that everyone's staying safe and healthy and surviving this really challenging time period for all of us.
Yeah, stay safe, everybody, and best of luck, and look forward to being back again next week.